John Keats to B.R. Haydon, 20th of November, 1816. My dear Sir, last evening wrought me up, and I cannot forbear sending you the following. Yours unfeignedly, John Keats. Great spirits now on earth are sojourning, he of the cloud, the cataract, the lake, who on Helvellyn's summit, wide awake, catches his freshness from archangel's wing, he of the rose, the violet, the spring, the social smile, the chain for freedom's sake, and lo, whose steadfastness would never take a meaner sound than Raphael's whispering, and other spirits are there standing apart upon the forehead of the age to come. These will give the world another heart, and other pulses. Hear ye not the hum of mighty workings in a distant mart? Listen a while, ye nations, and be dumb. November the 20th. John Keats, letter to B.R. Haydon, 21st of November, 1816. My dear Sir, your letters filled me with a proud pleasure and shall be kept by me as a stimulus to exertion I begin to fix my eye upon one horizon. My feelings entirely fall in with yours in regard to the ellipsis, and I glory in it. The idea of your sending it to Wordsworth put me out of breath. You know with what reverence I would send my well wishes to him. Hear ye not the hum of mighty workings? Listen a while, ye nations, and be dumb. November the 20th. William Wordsworth, from a letter to Benjamin Robert Haydon, 20th of January, 1817. Your account of young Keats interests me not a little, and the sonnet appears to be of good promise. Of course, neither you nor I, being so highly complimented in the composition, can be deemed judges altogether impartial. But it is assuredly vigorously conceived and well expressed. Leigh Hunt's compliment is well deserved, and the sonnet is very agreeably concluded. John Keats, from a letter to Benjamin Robert Haydon, 10th of January, 1818. Every day, the older I get, the greater is my idea of your achievements in art, and I am convinced that there are three things to rejoice at in this age: the excursion, your pictures, and Hazlitt's depth of taste. Yours affectionately, John Keats. John Keats, from a letter to George and Georgiana Keats, 3rd of January, 1819. There is another thing I must mention of the momentous kind, but I must mind my periods in it. Mrs. Dilke has 2 cats, a mother and a daughter. Now, the mother is a tabby, and the daughter a black and white, like the spotted child. Now, it appears ominous to me, for the doors of both houses are opened frequently, so that there is a complete thoroughfare for both cats, there being no board up to the contrary. They may one and several of them come into my room ad libitum. But no, the tabby only comes. Whether from sympathy from Anne, the maid, or me, I cannot tell, or whether Brown has left behind him any atmospheric spirit of maidenhood, I cannot tell. The cat is not an old maid herself, her daughter is proof of it. I have questioned her. I have looked at the lines of her paws, I have felt her pulse, to no purpose. Why should the old cat come to me? I ask myself, and myself has not a word to answer. Percy B. Shelley, from a letter to Marianne Hunt, October 1820. I shall take care to bestow every possible attention on Keats. I consider his a most valuable life, and I am deeply interested in his safety. I intend to be the physician both of his body and his soul, to keep one warm, and to teach the other Greek and Spanish. I am aware indeed in part that I am nourishing a rival who will far surpass, and this is an additional motive, and will be an added pleasure. Percy B. Shelley to James Ollier, 6th of September, 1819. Much praise is due to me for having read Endymion, the author's intention appearing to be that no person should possibly get to the end of it, yet it is full of some of the highest and finest gleams of poetry. I think if he had printed about 50 pages of fragments from it, I should have been led to admire Keats as a poet more than I ought, of which there is now no danger. Percy Bysshe Shelley to John Keats. Pisa, 27th of July, 1820. My dear Keats, I hear with great pain the dangerous accident that you have undergone, and Mr. Gisborne, who gives me the account of it, adds that you continue to wear a consumptive appearance. This consumption is a disease particularly fond of people who write such good verses as you have done, and with the assistance of an English winter, it can often indulge its selection. I do not think that young and amiable poets are at all bound to gratify its taste. They have entered into no bond with the muses to that effect. But seriously, for I am joking on what I am very anxious about, I think you would do well to pass the winter after so tremendous an accident in Italy. And if you think it as necessary as I do, so long as you could to find Pisa or its neighbourhood agreeable to you, Mrs. Shelley unites with myself in urging the request that you would take up your residence with us. You might come by sea to Leghorn. France is not worth seeing, and the sea air is particularly good for weak lungs, which is within a few miles of us. You ought, at all events, to see Italy, and your health, which I suggest as a motive, might be an excuse to you. I spare declamation about the statues and paintings and the ruins, and what is greater piece of forbearance, about the mountains and streams and the fields and the colours of the sky and the sky itself. I have lately read your Endymion again, and ever with a new sense of treasures of poetry it contains, though treasures poured forth with indistinct profusion. This people in general will not endure, and that is the cause of the comparatively few copies which have been sold. I feel persuaded that you are capable of the greatest things, so you but will. I always tell Ollier to send you copies of my books. Prometheus Unbound I imagine you will receive nearly at the same time with this letter. The Cenci I hope you have already received. It was studiously composed in a different style. Below the good, how far, but far above the great. In poetry, I have sought to avoid system and mannerism. I wish those who excel me in genius would pursue the same plan. Whether you remain in England or journey to Italy, believe that you carry with you my anxious wishes for your health, happiness, and success, wherever you are or whatever you undertake, and that I am yours sincerely, P.B. Shelley. John Keats to Percy Bysshe Shelley, Hampstead, 16th of August, 1820. My dear Shelley, I am very much gratified that you, in a foreign country and with a mind almost over-occupied, should write to me in the strain of the letter beside me. If I do not take advantage of your invitation, it will be prevented by a circumstance I have very much at heart to prophesy. There is no doubt that an English winter would put an end to me, and do so in a lingering, hateful manner. Therefore, I must either voyage or journey to Italy as a soldier marches up to a battery. My nerves at present are the worst part of me, yet they feel soothed when I think that, come what extreme may, I shall not be destined to remain in one spot long enough to take a hatred of any 4 particular bedposts. I am glad that you take pleasure in my poor poem, which I would willingly take the trouble to unwrite, if possible, did I care so much as I have done about reputation. I received a copy of the Cenci, as from yourself from Hunt. There is only one part of it I am judge of, the poetry and dramatic effect, which by many spirits nowadays is considered the mammon. A modern work, it is said, must have a purpose, which may be the god. An artist must serve mammon. He must have self-concentration, selfishness, perhaps. You, I am sure, will forgive me for sincerely remarking that you might curb your magnanimity and be more of an artist, and load every rift of your subject with awe. The thought of such discipline must fall like cold chains upon you, who perhaps never sat with your wings furled for 6 months together. And is it not this extraordinary talk for the writer of Endymion, whose mind was like a pack of scattered cards? I am picked up and sorted to a pip. My imagination is a monastery and I am its monk. You must explain my metaphysics to yourself. I am in expectation of Prometheus every day. Could I have my own wish for its interest affected, you would have it still in manuscript, or be but now putting an end to the second act. I remember you advising me not to publish my first blights on Hampstead Heath. I am returning advice upon your hands. Most of the poems in the volume I send you, the 1821, just out, have been written above 2 years and would never have been published but from a hope of gain. So you see, I am inclined enough to take your advice now. I must express once more my deep sense of your kindness, adding my sincere thanks and respects for Mrs. Shelley. In the hope of soon seeing you, I remain most sincerely yours, John Keats. John Keats, from an unsent letter to Charles Brown, 30th of September, 1820, aboard the Maria Crowther, off Yarmouth, Isle of Wight. My dear Brown, the time has not yet come for a pleasant letter from me. I have delayed writing to you from time to time because I felt how impossible it was to enliven you with one heartening hope of my recovery. This morning, in bed, the matter struck me in a different manner. I thought I would write while I was in some liking, or I might become too ill to write at all, and then if the desire to have written to you should become strong, it would be a great affliction to me. This may be my best opportunity. We're in a calm, and I am easy enough this morning. I wish for death every day and night to deliver me from these pains, and then I wish death away, for death would destroy even those pains which are better than nothing. Land and sea, weakness and decline are great separators, but death is the great divorcer forever. The thought of leaving Miss Braun is beyond everything horrible. The sense of darkness coming over me, I eternally see her figure eternally vanishing. Is there another life? Shall I awake and find this all a dream? There must be. We cannot be created for this sort of suffering. The receiving of this letter is to be one of yours. I will say nothing about our friendship, or rather you're to me more than that. As you deserve to escape, you will never be so unhappy as I am. I feel as if I was closing my last letter to you, my dear Brown. Your affectionate friend, John Keats. John Keats to Mrs. Braun, 24th of October, 1820, Naples Harbour. My dear Mrs. Braun, a few words will tell you what sort of a passage we had, and what situation we are in, and few they must be on account of quarantine, our letters being liable to be opened for the purpose of fumigation at the Health Office. We have to remain in the vessel 10 days, and are at present shut in a tier of ships. The sea air has been beneficial to me about to as great an extent as squally weather and bad accommodations and provisions has done harm, so I am about as I was. Give my love to Fanny, and tell her, if I were well, there is enough in this port of Naples to fill a quire of paper. But it looks like a dream. Every man who can row his boat and walk and talk seems a different being from myself. I do not feel in the world. It has been unfortunate for me that one of the passengers is a young lady in a consumption. Her imprudence has vexed me very much. The knowledge of her complaint, the flushings in her face, all her bad symptoms have preyed upon me. They would have done so had I been in good health. 7 now is a very good fellow, but his nerves are too strong to be hurt by other people's illnesses. I remember poor Rice wore me the same way in the Isle of Wight. I shall feel a load off me when the lady vanishes out of my sight. It is impossible to describe exactly what state of health I'm in. At this moment I am suffering from indigestion very much, which makes such stuff of this letter. I would always wish you to think of me a little worse than I really am, and not being of sanguine disposition, I am likely to succeed. If I do not recover, your regret will be softened. If I do, your pleasure will be doubled. I dare not fix my mind upon Fanny. I have dared not to think of her. The only comfort I have had that way has been in thinking for hours together of having the knife she had me put in a silver case, the hair in a locket, and the pocketbook in a gold net. Show her this. I dare not say more, yet must not believe I am so ill as this letter may look, for if ever there has been a person born without the faculty of hoping, I am he. 7 is writing to Haslam, and I have just asked him to request Haslam to send you his account of my health. Oh, what an account I could give of the Bay of Naples if I could once more feel myself a citizen of this world. I feel a spirit in my brain would lay it forth pleasantly. Oh, what a misery it is to have an intellect in splints. My love again to Fanny. Tell Toots I wish I could pitch her a basket of grapes, and tell same the fellows catch here with the line, little fish, much like an anchovy. Pull them up fast. Remember me to Mrs. and Mr. Dilke. Mention to Brown I wrote him a letter at Portsmouth, which I did not send him, and am in doubt if he ever will see it. My dear Mrs. Braun, yours sincerely and affectionate, John Keats. Goodbye, Fanny. God bless you. John Keats to Charles, 30th of November, 1820, from Rome. My dear Brown, 'tis the most difficult thing in the world to me to write a letter. My stomach continues so bad that I feel it worse on opening any book, yet I am much better than I was in quarantine. Then I am afraid to encounter the proing and conning of anything interesting to me in England. I have an habitual feeling of my real life having passed, and that I am leading a posthumous existence. God knows how it would have been, but it appears to me, however, I will not speak of the subject. I must have been at Bedhampton nearly at the same time you were writing to me from Chichester. How unfortunate. And to pass on the river too. There was my star predominant. I cannot answer anything in your letter, which followed me from Naples to Rome, because I am afraid to look it over again. I am so weak in mind that I cannot bear the sight of any handwriting of a friend I love so much as I do you. Yet I ride the little horse and, at my worst, even in quarantine, summoned up more puns, in a sort of desperation, in 1 week than in any year of my life. There is one thought enough to kill me. I have been well, healthy, alert, etc., walking with her, and now, the knowledge of contrast, feeling for light and shade, all that information, primitive sense, necessary for a poem, are great enemies to the recovery of the stomach. There, you rogue, I put you to the torture. But you must bring your philosophy to bear, as I do mine, really, or how should I be able to live? Dr. Clark is very attentive to me. He says there is very little the matter with my lungs, but my stomach, he says, is very bad. I am well disappointed in hearing good news from George, for it runs in my head that we shall all die young. I have not written to Reynolds yet, which he must think very neglectful. Being anxious to send him a good account of my health, I have delayed it from week to week. If I recover, I will do all in my power to correct the mistakes made during sickness. And if I should not, all my faults will be forgiven. 7 is very well, though he leads so dull a life with me. Remember me to all friends, and tell Haslam I should not have left London without taking leave of him, but from being so low in body and mind. Write to George as soon as you receive this, and tell him how I am, as far as you can guess. And also a note to my sister, who walks about my imagination like a ghost. She is so like Tom. I can scarcely bid you goodbye, even in a letter. I always made an awkward bow. God bless you. John Keats.
Hi, I'm Susan Wolfson, author or assembler of On He Flared. 226 years ago this Halloween, the spark that became the genius of John Keats's poetry was born. I'm delighted to introduce my little book for the Keats House, On He Flared, which presents 4 essays and 1 poem by me, drawn from the parallel archive of Keats's letters. I say parallel because the letters of poets are often treated as a supplementary resource for reading the creative work. Keats's letters, as we know, are otherwise. This is such a sociable archive, as brilliant and lively as the poetry. Here are letters to read, to reread, to share, to interread, a verb that Keats coined for ideal corresponding among readers of the same thing. By turns, often in the same letter, Keats, the letter writer, is playful, ironic, sentimental, funny, witty, thoughtful, passionate, candid, full of thinking about poetic styles, poetic methods, poetic purposes, about people and places, about the worlds he inhabited, flashing phrases which never desert the memory. That's T.S. Eliot's appreciation for another writer, but I'll borrow it for Keats. No surprise that striking passages in Keats's letters have a poetic pulse. And no surprise, too, that some of his poetry was first drafted in or into his letters, even as letters. Here's a thought experiment, the sort of thing Keats liked to entertain in his letters. Suppose a rose to have sensation, or may there not be superior beings amused with any graceful, though instinctive attitude my mind may fall into, as I am entertained with the alertness of a stoat, or the anxiety of a deer? Let us suppose that Keats's fame was primarily as a letter writer of extraordinarily compelling interest, liveliness, and power, which he is, who also happened to write poetry. Just a speculation, in both the cognitive sense of speculation and in the investment sense, inspired the unparalleled Keats Letters Project, Corresponding with Keats. This initiative took up a bicentenary project of publishing essays, variously meditative, interpretive, playful, informative, on the 200th anniversary of every one of Keats's letters for whom they could enlist a commentator. It's quite an archive, and it's still unfolding, 200 plus letters. That is to say 200 plus anniversaries. They didn't get to all 300 or so letters. Well, there are opportunities still awaiting the willing, the imaginative, for engagements of Keatsians near and far, veterans and newcomers, students and professors, lovers of Keats, and everyone in between, not covered by that. When I was asked by some of the founders of the Keats Letters Project, in particular Kate Singer, Ian Newman, and especially Brian Rejak, to contribute an essay, my first understandable impulse was to put in a bid for the most famous, the most anthologized gems. The letters we know that gave us such memorable epiphanies as negative capability, the intensity of working out conceits, life as a veil of soul making, imagination as the ardor of pursuit, the character of the chameleon poet versus the Wordsworthian or egotistical sublime, life as a movement from the chamber of maiden thought into dark passages, poetry as a surprise by fine excess, and last, the pained, sad sensation on Keats's part of leading a posthumous existence with a final awkward bow. To write about Keats's letters was my dreamland in both senses. First, in my dreams. Of course, the founders had first dibs on the gems, but their preemption proved something of a felix culpa for me, because I wound up with surprisingly unanticipated landings that gave me new dreams, hauntingly adhesive engagements, lively affections, and the durable intimacies of reading word by word, line by line, sometimes syllable by syllable, ranging from Keats's early correspondence with the passionate painter Benjamin Robert Haydon in November 1816. Only the 12th and 13th letters in Hyder Rollins's still standard edition are these letters. These are about one of Keats's early fired up sonnets, great spirits now on earth are sojourning. Then there's a mid-career letter that I love that pauses for bemused, inquisitive, tender affection for some household cats, January 1819. That's the source of my poem. To a carefully measured soul correspondence with Percy Bysshe Shelley in the summer of 1820, in which Keats insists on the charge of poetry to load every rift with ore. And then the accidental timeliness for us of a quarantine letter in October 1820 to the mother of his beloved Fanny Braun from the alternate agonies and amusements of a long 10 days arrest in Naples Harbor. And then with many others from the Letters Project, all of us took up some facet of Keats's last known letter to Charles Brown, written from Rome, 30 November, 1820, from this very Keats house, in the last of Keats's negative capabilities. It was my thrill to write 4 essays for this project, and then to revisit and revise them this year. That's a very Keatsian kind of activity, by the way, revisiting and revising. Here I had the advantage of Marina Traylor's production designing for the booklet On He Flared. On he flared. These are the final words that Keats wrote in his poet-autobiography, The Fall of Hyperion. It remained unfinished. It broke off at the fierce energy of a god who, having seen his brother gods, once immortals, fall into mortal sadness and death, knows his own doom, feels it fiercely on his pulses. Yet he responds in Keats's conception, not with sad surrender and defeat, but with full throttle passion. Keats's letters, from beginning to end, give us the man and the craftsman embracing life's energies with death on a too near horizon. On he flared, and he still does. Thank you.